A woman in her early 40s stepped into the Dominion Chess Society on Park Row. She wore a pale blue dress, the kind you might find at a quiet farmer's market, plain, functional, and unremarkable to the trained eyes of Fifth Avenue's elite. Her name was Mara Ellis, and despite her modest appearance, her steps were calm and steady, as though she belonged, even in a room that was architecturally designed to say she didn't. Inside, the club radiated old-world grandeur, velvet drapes, high-backed leather chairs, and marble busts of long-dead champions gazing down as if still judging the moves of the living. The chandeliers sparkled with cold authority, and the soft clinking of chess pieces on alabaster boards punctuated the hush like a whispered code. At the center of it all sat Edwin Lockridge, 39, the club's reigning chess champion and unofficial emperor. With his slicked-back salt and pepper hair, Italian tailoring, and silver cufflinks shaped like knights, Edwin was the kind of man who could cut someone down with a smirk before the first pawn had moved. His blue-gray eyes scanned the room like searchlights looking for weakness. "Bored again, Edwin?" asked Martin Clay, a longtime member, sipping from a crystal tumbler filled with something old and overpriced. "No one worth playing," Edwin replied. "Maybe I've outgrown the competition." His words barely floated past his lips before the heavy double doors opened again, letting in a draft of city air and Mara, who stepped cautiously into the space like someone walking into a sacred temple. Her entrance caused ripples, nothing obvious, but enough for Edwin to tilt his head. The woman didn't carry herself like a tourist, nor like a staff member. She didn't look wealthy, but neither did she seem nervous. She looked present. She approached the front desk. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Professor Lionel Granger. He invited me here at 8. The receptionist, a sharp-featured woman in pearls and judgment, eyed Mara's simple dress with a flicker of disdain. "Professor Granger is running late. He called a few minutes ago. You may wait, if you like." There was an implication in her tone. "You don't belong." Mara nodded. "Thank you," she said, entirely unbothered, and moved past the desk to find a seat near the far end of the main floor. She chose a chair close to the wall, observing the games in play with quiet intensity. From his usual perch, Edwin narrowed his eyes. She wasn't just watching. She was analyzing. He knew that look. "Who's that?" he asked Martin, nodding toward her. Martin shrugged. "No idea. Probably someone's cousin or housekeeper." Edwin's lips curled. "She's studying the matches. Think she plays? Maybe she just likes shiny objects," Martin joked. But Edwin was no longer listening. He was already rising from his seat, the air around him shifting as others noticed his movement. When the king stands, the court pays attention. Edwin's footsteps echoed across the polished hardwood floor, each one measured and deliberate. Members of the Dominion Chess Society turned their heads, whispering behind hands and half-filled tumblers. It was rare, unheard of, really, for Edwin Lockridge to approach a stranger. Mara remained seated, eyes calmly following the final stages of a middle game in progress just a few feet away. A queenside assault was unfolding. She could see the checkmate forming in 5 moves, though the defending player hadn't noticed yet. "Enjoying the match?" Edwin's voice cut through the murmur like a crisp knife. Mara looked up. Her hazel eyes were neutral, unshaken. "Yes, very much." "You play?" he asked, his smile thin and suggestive. "A little," she answered. "A little," he repeated, amused by her understatement. "How charming." By now, a small crowd had begun to form, people drawn to the unexpected theater of Edwin Lockridge initiating conversation with someone not wearing tailored linen or pearls. Edwin took a step closer and said, louder now for the benefit of his audience, "Allow me to introduce myself, Edwin Lockridge, reigning club champion for the past 8 years." "Mara Ellis," she replied simply, without awe or fanfare. Edwin's smile wavered. No admiration. No recognition. Just her name. "Well, Miss Ellis," he said, perhaps you'd honor me with a game. A friendly match to welcome you properly to our club. I appreciate the offer, but I'm just waiting for someone, Mara said, gesturing subtly toward the reception. Oh, it won't take long, he insisted, the forced politeness barely veiling his condescension. A brief game. Just for fun. Mara glanced around. The receptionist was watching with a grin of amusement. Other members had abandoned their own matches to see how this encounter would unfold. I'd really rather not, she replied, still calm. Edwin's tone darkened. Surely you're not afraid of a little chess? I said I play a little, Mara corrected. That's not quite the same as seeking a challenge. Light laughter fluttered through the crowd. Edwin's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. One game, he pressed, now with a note of provocation. Unless you feel this place is beneath your skill level. Mara exhaled quietly. She knew this kind of man. Saying no again would only deepen the spectacle. Very well, Mr. Lockridge. One game. Edwin's smirk returned as he gestured toward the center table beneath the grand chandelier. Shall we? As they made their way to the table, the front doors opened once again. A tall older man with silver hair and a kind face beneath his glasses entered the room. Professor Lionel Granger, 71, paused as he took in the scene. Mara, he called out, his voice warm. Mara turned with a smile. Mr. Lockridge has invited me to a game while I wait. Lionel's eyes widened slightly as he looked from Edwin to Mara. Has he now? Just a friendly match, Edwin said smoothly. To welcome your guest. Lionel hesitated, then nodded. Well, this should be interesting. He stepped aside to join the growing ring of spectators. Do you feel up to it? Mara's expression didn't shift. It's just one game, Lionel. Very well, he said, watching closely. Then I suggest you play your own game, and remember what I taught you. Edwin raised an eyebrow, but said nothing as he moved to the black side of the board. The set was carved from Italian alabaster and obsidian, each piece gleaming under the lights like a soldier ready to take orders. Ladies first, Edwin offered, gesturing to the white pieces. Mara adjusted her chair and lightly ran a finger across the white king before moving her pawn to e4 with practiced grace. Edwin responded instantly, pushing his knight to f6, a bolder, less common defense, meant to unsettle and provoke. Mara paused only briefly, then brought her knight to c3 with quiet assurance. There was no hesitation in her movements, no fumbling, no false starts. Her fingers moved with the fluidity of long habit. Edwin narrowed his eyes. Interesting choice, he said, as though speaking to a student he expected to trip over her own ambition. Every choice in chess should be interesting, Mara replied, her voice calm but edged with meaning. Otherwise, why play? The line drew a few smirks from the bystanders, though not at her expense. Edwin played a pawn to a5, trying to gain control of the board's left flank. Mara, without missing a beat, moved her bishop to pin his knight against the king. It was sharp. Fast. Clean. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Martin leaned over to another member and whispered, "That wasn't luck. That was a trap." Edwin said nothing, but his jaw tightened. His opponent was not only competent, she was dangerous. "You've had some training," he said, studying the board. Mara didn't answer. She was already planning 2 moves ahead. The game had shifted. No longer a social courtesy, no longer theater, this was now battle. For 20 minutes, the Dominion Chess Society was silent except for the soft clicks of the clock and the occasional intake of breath. The expected humiliation never came. Instead, what emerged was a match of pure tension, strategy for strategy, exchange for exchange. Mara sacrificed a knight to take control of the board center, drawing Edwin into a fight he didn't expect. The advantage tilted, subtly but certainly, in her favor. "Check," she said quietly, moving her bishop with elegant precision. Edwin countered, but it cost him. Where the hell did she learn that? Martin asked, voice barely audible. Professor Granger, standing with arms crossed near the back of the ring, allowed himself a small smile. She was my student, he said. The club president, standing nearby, turned with wide eyes. Student? She could teach here. Granger nodded. She could teach anywhere. Edwin tried a clever attack, trading his queen for tempo. But Mara anticipated the feint. Her rook slid across the board like a guillotine. Check. Edwin moved. Desperate now. Reckless. 3 moves later, she boxed him in. Checkmate, Mara announced softly. There was a long, impossible pause in the room. Edwin Lockridge, undefeated for nearly a decade, stared at the board. His king was cornered. His pieces were scattered. The verdict was final. Somewhere near the bar, a glass clinked nervously. Mara, her expression unchanged, gently began resetting the board, aligning each piece with careful accuracy. That was, Edwin began, but the words faltered. Unexpected. Mara looked up, finally meeting his gaze. Would you like another game, Mr. Lockridge? I believe tradition calls for a rematch. The room erupted, not in laughter, but in something closer to awe. Edwin straightened in his chair, face flushed. Around him, the crowd leaned in. No one sipped their drinks now. No one whispered. Yes, he said, regaining composure, a rematch would be appropriate. He hesitated, then added, let's make it interesting. Mara tilted her head slightly. If I win, Edwin continued, you tell us who you really are. And where you learned to play like that. And if I win? Mara asked, voice cool. Edwin opened his mouth, then paused. He had nothing to offer she seemed to want. If I win, Mara said for him, you stop humiliating newcomers to this club for sport. A soft gasp passed through the crowd. Some exchanged wide-eyed looks. Others nodded, as though someone had finally said what needed to be said. Edwin's mouth opened, closed, then finally settled on, deal. He reached for the white pieces this time. I'll take white, he said. As you wish. The board was reset. The pieces aligned. The clock ticked. The room, now twice as full, held its breath. The second game began with Edwin playing aggressively, trying to establish dominance early. He pushed his pawns forward like infantrymen on adrenaline. Mara responded not with caution, but with an eerie calm that unsettled even the seasoned observers. 10 moves in, Winston Davis, one of the club's older members, whispered to Professor Granger, she's extraordinary. Where did you find her? Granger didn't blink. I didn't. She found me. Years ago. She could be a grandmaster. She was nearly one, Granger replied. On the board, Edwin sacrificed a pawn to gain initiative. For a moment, the audience leaned forward. But Mara's counterplay unfolded like a page from a forgotten textbook, clean, invisible, and devastating. She maneuvered her queen behind enemy lines with quiet elegance, and with each piece she activated, the pressure on Edwin mounted. Even the staff had stopped working. One waiter held a silver tray motionless near the door. Check, Mara said again, her voice soft but inescapable. Edwin moved his king. Check, she said again, this time sliding her rook to the 7th rank. 3 moves later, Edwin's position crumbled. With no other legal moves remaining, he tipped his king and looked up. Who are you? He asked, breath short, pride fraying. Mara glanced toward Lionel Granger. He nodded subtly. My name is Mara Ellis, she said. I used to be Mara Kellerman. Perhaps some of your older members might remember the name. A murmur traveled like electricity across the room. Kellerman, a white-haired man near the back gasped. The prodigy from the Midwest? She was supposed to be in the international finals, said another. She vanished before the tournament. Granger nodded. She was the most gifted player I ever trained. Qualified for the World Championship at 15. And then, she walked away. Edwin blinked. Why? Mara's gaze lingered on the marble pieces before her. Because somewhere along the way, she said, the joy of the game was replaced by pressure. I realized I loved chess most when no one was watching. So I stopped playing, for crowds. The room stood still as Mara's words echoed in the polished chamber, bouncing off chandeliers and leather-bound silence. For me, she continued, chess was never about the trophies or the spotlight. It was about the beauty of the game. And when that beauty was buried beneath egos and expectations, I chose to walk away. Granger stepped beside her, pride in every line of his face. She never stopped playing, he said. She just stopped performing. The silence broke into quiet murmurs, then a rising tide of awe. Even those who had dismissed her on sight now looked at Mara with something close to reverence. Edwin, once the unshakable king of the Dominion Chess Society, was quiet for a long time. Then he stood and extended a hand. I owe you an apology, he said. The words came awkwardly, heavy on his tongue. I was arrogant. And unkind. Mara regarded him for a long moment, then shook his hand. Apology accepted. A beat passed. You would be welcomed here anytime, Edwin added. In fact, would you consider giving a lecture? Or a demonstration? The club would gain so much from your insights. She gave a small smile. I appreciate the offer. But I have a full life. I teach mathematics to 5th graders. That's where I belong. Edwin looked surprised. You could be a grandmaster. I could, she agreed. But I've learned something more valuable than checkmates. When we play for love, we gain more than victory. We gain peace. She turned to go, Granger at her side. Just before reaching the grand doors, Mara stopped and looked back at Edwin. By the way, she said, don't forget our wager. Edwin blinked, then nodded, embarrassed but sincere. No more ambushing unsuspecting guests. I promise. Mara gave a small nod, then left the room. As the heavy doors closed behind her, something shifted inside the Dominion. Conversations resumed, but with a different tone. Laughter softened. The games that followed were slower, more thoughtful. People moved their pieces with new eyes. At his usual table, Edwin sat down. He pulled out a small notebook, something he hadn't done in years, and began to write. Not to record a victory, but to remember the lesson. A woman in a pale blue dress had walked in alone, ignored, underestimated. And left as the one who reminded them all what chess could truly be. What we learn from the story of Mara Ellis. True worth isn't defined by appearance. Mara arrived in a simple dress, with no jewelry or flashy presents, yet she humbled an entire elite chess club. The story reminds us that someone's true value often lies far beneath the surface. Humility is a form of strength. Mara never boasted, never tried to stand out. She let her moves speak for her. True humility isn't weakness, it's confidence that doesn't need to shout. Play for passion, not ego. Mara was once a prodigy, but she stepped away from the spotlight to protect her love for the game. She teaches us that when a passion becomes pressure, it's okay to step back to preserve its joy. Arrogance will always be tested. Edwin represented the type who is used to winning without effort and looking down on others. This story shows that eventually, someone will come along who forces you to lower your pride and relearn humility. How you win matters more than the win itself. Mara didn't seek victory to gloat. She won to make a point. Power should not be used to humiliate others, but to inspire and elevate.